Welcome to Corporate Law Lab. I'm Neil Taylor. This is part 2 of my interview with Jordan Bleznick. If you want to save taxes, what's the most important thing?
Taxes?
Yeah. If you say, I don't want to pay taxes anymore, and I come to you, the tax lawyer extraordinaire, and say, I don't want to pay taxes anymore, what do I do?
First, you earn $1 billion.
There you go. That's where I was going.
And you hire a tax lawyer.
Okay.
Who lets you, we did it the old fashioned way, I have to say. There was ProPublica I would say illegally got a hold of a lot of billionaire tax returns, including Musk and Carl. And they said things that were not based on the actual tax law. So, for example, Musk never sells his shares. Carl has because of his war chest, has a lot of interest expense, and he's not selling his share. So Carl didn't have any taxable income in the years they looked at because he had interest expenses. Now, that may not be true in every year, but it was true in the years they looked at. And then nobody ever said, even Warren Buffett has never paid more, whether people believe it or not, Warren Buffett structured his situation very favorably for tax purposes. Like, he'll never tell you that. He'll just tell you he's making less than a secretary or paying less taxes than a secretary.
Right.
But, you can structure your tax affairs to avoid it. You can't evade it, but you can avoid it. And evasion is kind of a part objective, part subjective thing where you do something solely for tax purposes. You enter into transactions that make no sense economically.
So that had to be a key to when you were coming up with structures. They not only had to work mathematically, but you also had to have a good argument that they had economic substance.
Yes. And that was a good thing because working with Carl, it's possible that Carl wouldn't have done certain of these deals without the taxes, but he bought whole businesses. It's kind of hard to argue that that's a tax play when you buy a whole casino and say
keep it for 10 years.
And you keep it. It's kind of hard to argue that that's a tax play. It's not a very good case for the government. Now, if we shut things down immediately, that's a very good case for the government.
So while we're in the general area of ethics and tax evasion, tax avoidance, can you talk a little bit about your investment in ImClone, Carl's investment in ImClone?
Right. Well, it was just, it's not really tax ethics, it's ethics generally.
No, I agree.
Yeah. But Carl owned a large position in ImClone, which was this guy named Sam Waxel, which I think to some extent he's an Ohio guy. But Waxel was developing this drug and found out that they weren't going to get FDA approval, which would mean the stock would go down significantly. And Sam called a few people. One of the people he called was Martha Stewart. The next person on the list was to call Carl's secretary, Susan, whatever. I'm not exactly sure about the call. It was in the New York Post, so something happened. And obviously, but he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't sell it. And ultimately, 5 or 6 years later, or 4 years later, he sold it at a tremendous profit. If Martha Stewart had just kept the stock, she would have done well.
Instead, she got the tip, sold the stock,
right,
and then didn't tell the truth when asked about it.
I think if she had handled it differently, she wouldn't have gotten in jail. Because, you watch her documentary, whatever. Not only did she sell the stock, but she didn't really know that much about it, but, she didn't tell the truth.
I heard from a friend who knew her defense lawyer and then later confirmed that this actually happened when I became friends with the prosecutor in that case, that when the defense lawyer told it to his friends as, I knew the exact moment that Martha Stewart was going to be indicted, when 3 hours into the conversation, she said, I've got a business to run. Are you about done here? and of course, the prosecutor said, yeah, he confirmed, yes, that happened, but of course not the reason he indicted her.
Yeah. But she came out of it okay.
Yeah. So,
oh, and by the way, Carl,
colorful, and let's talk about one of the more colorful things that ever happened there, and that's the Herbalife and Bill Ackman and the short squeeze. So who's Bill Ackman, I guess, to start?
So Bill Ackman is, I don't know, maybe 50 by now. He's a hedge fund guy, Pershing, and he's done up and down, but he's done okay. But he had developed a thesis that this company, Herbalife, was, this marketing company of these nutritional supplements or drinks, that he would, this company was a pyramid. It was a Ponzi scheme. I don't know if it's Ponzi pyramid, whatever you want to call it. And
it's definitely a multi-level marketing. Where, you become a distributor and you sign up sub-distributors.
Right. So now we talked about Herbalife. Now we go backwards in time.
Okay.
And we say, so what? So Ackman and Carl were involved in an investment, I don't know, 7 years prior, a number of years prior. And according to Ackman's view of the agreement, which turned out to be what won in court, Ackman sold a piece of a real estate partnership in an agreement which said that if Carl ever sold it within X number of years, typically 3 to 5 years, and he made a profit, even though Ackman no longer owned that stock, he would get a piece of the profits, and that was called schmuck insurance. Schmuck is a Yiddish word for fool. And so what happened was Carl, signed this agreement. The amounts involved were relatively small, like $7 million. Carl argued that even though the agreement said that he gave schmuck insurance, he argued that in the situation that they were in, that he didn't owe him Ackman. The real intent was he didn't owe Ackman schmuck insurance because the sale that Carl made wasn't for cash. It was for shares. So he says, well, if it's not for cash, you don't get schmuck insurance. The court disagreed with him. He lost the case. Carl was pissed as hell at him. And because he was so pissed at acrimonious toward Ackman, when Bill took a short in Herbalife, a large short, I think it was $1 billion, Carl came in and bought over a period of time, bought 25% of the company.
Okay. So for people that don't know, what's taking a short position?
Somehow it's easy to say, but hard. When you sell, a long is when you own shares, but nobody calls it a long. You own shares if it's a long. But you can go short, meaning you can sell shares, you can borrow shares. You don't own them, and then you can sell them. That's a short. So you're betting on, okay, I short at $50 a share. If the stock goes down to 15, I can go out and buy those shares at 15 and make a $35 profit on those shares. So Ackman was betting. Ackman called it. There was a movie. It was betting on zero. He said, there's no way this company's worth $35, $40, whatever it was. It's a scheme. He went out and made presentations to the FTC, but Carl came in and he bought it, and the stock went up because there was more interest in the company. because Carl came in. So ultimately, the value of the company for that reason and other reasons kept going up. Finally, Icahn says, I give, because he was, you can call it a short squeeze. He had to buy shares back in order to close his short, because you're borrowing shares and you're closing it by delivering shares.
In the middle of all this, I guess maybe early on, this was like started in 2014?
Something like that, yeah.
And was Icahn on CNBC and Carl called in? Something like that?
I think it was, or Icahn was somewhere else, but they ended up, when they did the top 10 entertaining moments in CNBC history, this was one of them. You can go on YouTube and see it.
I really sort of had it with this guy, Icahn. He's like the crybaby in the schoolyard. He was like one of these little Jewish boys crying that the world was taking advantage of him. It's like in the old song, you rue the day I ever met the guy.
There's a book about this whole story called Confidence Game, which is worth a read.
Now, if we had 3 hours,
in that
we could
context,
go
we were
through
winding
that,
down the fund. What he called schmuck insurance, because Carl Icahn, unfortunately, does not have a good reputation. Stick with me, because this is important. He was a bully, okay? I was not in a very good place in my business. You know what? This guy's roadkill on the hedge fund highway. I'm never going to have to worry about this kid again. He's not going to even have the resources to sue me. I take advantage of little people.
And Carl, why don't you just come clean on the Herbalife thing?
I didn't get on to be bullied by you, okay? If I could talk, let me talk. Start with what I want to say. Icahn is a liar, okay? That, without question, I will swear to it on any Bible you want. I got to tell you, I left. I couldn't figure out if he was the most sanctimonious guy I ever met in my life or the most arrogant. As far as I'm concerned, the guy is a major loser. You know, this young man, I'd be happy if I could be assured of one thing in my life, is you are sure of everything. Then he talks about charity. That's complete. He's not giving it to charity.
Let me remind you that we are on live television, so that was an interesting choice of words.
Look at what he said. Let me say,
Can I just say a couple? Okay, so it's just false.
I can't hear what you said, Bill. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Carl, you and I can talk offline. We're wasting the world's time on this. I think that Carl either has a very, very bad memory or he has trouble with the truth. Carl, after the whole thing, called me up and he literally said, Bill, we can be friends now.
I never said that I want to be friends with you, Bill.
Okay, let's
I
move
wouldn't
on.
mess with you.
Let's
you were
move
the last
on.
man on earth. Hey, look, if you want a friend, get a dog. Listen, if I'm going to admit it, that I own stock, I'm not going to admit it with a guy like you on the TV, because I don't think you've been handling this fairly.
Yeah.
You seem like a nice enough guy. I don't think I've ever been on a show with you. You're giving me all this. Hey, and Max Meyer said I could say what I wanted on the show, so I'm saying it.
We'll send Max the bill. No, wait, Carl. Let me just say, first of all, let me say, Carl.
I'm not. I don't like being bullied. Years ago, why the heck are you getting involved in? I obviously don't like Icahn. Icahn is lying about what the hell does Icahn do? Ask him. He's on the phone. He's right here. Hey, you don't have to tell me what I'm free to do.
Okay, well,
maybe you don't.
That's
but
number one.
I appreciate, Bill, that you called me a great investor. I thank you for that. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for you, but I'd like to ask you, congratulations on one good trade. I sort of missed that.
Bill, I so much appreciate you coming on today. Carl, I hope you'll come back. That's all I can say.
I didn't hear you tell me that you appreciated me coming on.
Well, I think it was obviously meant there when I said I hope you'll come back, right? I mean,
all right.
Where Carl, well, you had some of the quotes, but Carl and Icahn got into a pretty acrimonious fight about who to trust. And Carl basically said, I wouldn't trust Icahn. He'd be the last person on earth that I would invest with. If there was nobody left on earth, I still wouldn't invest.
And he called him a crybaby.
Called him a crybaby. Well, he used the word because a lot of these guys, I can say because I'm Jewish, he called them like a nerdy Jewish kid in the schoolyard getting beaten up. That was his description of Icahn.
And Carl's Jewish too, right?
Carl's Jewish. He's not the most religious, but he is Jewish.
So at some point in this, Carl's got a huge amount of money invested in Herbalife, right?
Oh yeah, he had, it might have been $1 billion.
At some point, if he's doing it because he sees that Icahn is exposed on the short side, And I don't know how much, I don't know how much he was, it doesn't sound like the kind of company that Carl would fall in love with, right?
No,
Most of what we've described are real companies with serious assets.
but he was okay with it. He himself probably doesn't know if it was a Ponzi. You know what I'm saying? It's like one of these things that you just don't know. It looks like one. The FTC really didn't hit Herbalife that hard at the time. They fined him like a couple $100 million, but that was like 2% of the company. So yeah, exactly.
So how did Carl de-risk his position when he puts $1 billion of his own money or his company's money on the line for Herbalife, knowing that he's got, by buying all of that stock, it made it even harder. It not only supported the stock price, but it also made it harder for Icahn to cover, right?
Exactly.
There wasn't stock available.
Exactly. Carl put on his shares, do not lend. do not use for closing short sales. So, yeah, exactly. So one of the things that Carl did, and this goes back to the Greenmail rules. One of the things that Carl did.
Well, and let me just stop you there to remind people, because it was a while ago in the conversation, the Greenmail rules prevented him from doing better than any other stockholder on an exit.
Right.
Okay.
That's the general rule. There's a limitation. It was basically the anti-Carl bill, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And it stemmed from the 1980s. And so what he did was something called a Dutch auction. And a Dutch auction treated all shareholders the same. So let's say the stock price was 50. The company would say, okay, I'll go out and I'll buy back shares within a range of 47 to 49. Now, most shareholders, why would they sell shares at 47, 48, or 49 when they could call up their broker and sell them for 50? But Carl couldn't do that.
And didn't want to, because he would then...
He did want to.
Well, he wanted to sell, but he didn't want to sell in the public market. He was happy to sell to the company.
Right. Well, there wasn't enough liquidity to sell types of shares. So instead of selling in the market, some other people participated. So there was every shareholder had the right to sell back their shares in the Dutch auction. It stems from the tulip market in Holland.
Okay. I wondered why it was a Dutch auction.
Yeah. Stems was supposed to be funny. It wasn't funny.
So by doing that, he's de-risking his side of...
Exactly. So he would go down. There'd be fewer. It was consistent with keeping Icahn away because there'd be fewer shares. And he would go down in interest. But yes, ultimately he got out of it. But it took a while. And he did well by it.
Yeah, I think 700 to 800 million he made off of it.
Something like that.
And the especially delicious part for Carl, and maybe not so much for Icahn, was that Icahn and Pershing lost over $1 billion.
It was a close. I don't know which one was first or second.
Okay. On the happiness scale for Carl, the which one? He was probably as happy that Icahn lost.
Yeah, I'm joking a little, but it worked out beautifully. Now Icahn has no short interest. He got out of it years ago.
Right.
And Herbalife's going down. So now he calls it a psychological short. He's trying to vindicate himself.
Okay. Who would have thought tax could be so funny?
Very few people.
Yeah. You talked about cash-rich companies and how whenever Carl saw a company that had large cash reserves, he would start talking to them about how they needed to distribute that cash.
Correct.
I guess the company that managed to accumulate more cash than probably any other in history is Apple.
Correct.
And Carl never tried to buy Apple, right?
Well, we bought 1% of the company,
Okay. And
which was $1 billion plus. So yeah, Tim Cook wasn't run by us, but he did meet with Cook. He wrote letters to Cook. Yeah, the whole thesis was you have all this undistributed cash that the company should distribute to its shareholders. And the defense was, it was partly tax, saying, well, even though we have all this cash, some of it's in foreign countries, we'd have to pay tax on bringing it back to the U.S. And they Apple made their tax rate higher than it really was, stuff like that.
again, you were saying when you look at the 10K and you see the tax number, that's the booked tax number.
Right. Initially, I mean, now people tend to report their tax cash, but their book tax number was decently smaller than their tax number, cash tax number.
And was that obvious to you from looking at their filings?
Yeah. It was pretty, there are rates in there. You can sort of put two and two together. And, there's some entries here and there that'll guide you, but I could tell, and I wrote something. We told the company, we said, your tax rate isn't 26%, whatever the rate was in those days.
Right.
It was higher that was before 2017. Your tax rate really is more like 19 or 20. You're exaggerating things. It got some traction. Now Apple's returned a lot of money to their shareholders, in the last few years. And they did return some money to the shareholders back then as well. But the corporate tax rate is lower than it used to be, so now it's only 21%.
We used to say when people would, I occasionally worked in companies that had some money, and when they wanted us to cash out a big dividend, management's answer was, well, we would only do that if we didn't have another use for the money that we thought was better.
Exactly.
I assume that wouldn't be Carl's favorite thing to hear from somebody like me.
No, not really. Unless you had a dedicated use. Apple there's a lot of cash sitting there, and it wasn't being utilized.
Yeah, I remember when we sold the Asian assets in Millicom when I was there, we distributed a lot of that cash to the shareholders because it was something we'd been in for 30 years, and we didn't have something that we wanted to do with, I think in total it was about 800 million.
Well, stock buybacks in particular became popular. One is, and part of that's tax. If you distribute cash to everybody, then that's a dividend for tax purposes. And it'll be more taxable than if you do a buyback.
Yeah, and we did both at the time.
Yeah. So, now there's an excise tax, which, they're talking about for the new legislation, whether they should continue it or increase it. You have to pay the company has to pay a 1% excise tax. So if you redeem $100 million, the company would have to pay a tax of $1 million.
Well, and I think part of that was to deal with what were perceived as inappropriate buybacks, where a company is borrowing money to be able to do a buyback.
Yeah, that's correct.
And if you look at that from the standpoint of assuming that the company and the shareholders are a different thing, it's maybe good for the shareholders, but probably not good for the company to borrow a bunch of money to give it to the shareholders.
Right, that's correct. But in Apple's situation, they didn't have any problems finding cash. So
for the, I guess there were two more transactions I wanted to talk to you about. One was very early on TWA, and one was much more recent. It actually happened at the start of COVID, which was Hertz. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's go with TWA.
Okay, so TWA, for our students who've never heard of TWA, was at one point one of the largest airlines in the world.
And a big international airline.
Right.
So TWA, Carl had this thing about buying a company, an air transportation company. It was something, I think part of it is where he grew up, you could see JFK, the flights taking off. That was part of it.
That's right. He's from Rockaway, right? He's from Rockaway, right?
Far Rockaway, a place called Bayswater. It is right next to JFK. That's my theory, but it's not widely subscribed to. TWA, the airlines were going through a tough time. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but, they had done deregulation and this and that. And so TWA, but Carl had an interest in TWA. So he acquired a small, just like he always did, a relatively small position in TWA. And then he made an offer. It took a couple of years to buy the whole company. Now, in order to buy the whole company, you would have to put debt on the company. So TWA, they weren't doing that well, but they had some valuable assets. They had these routes to London were considered very valuable. And he also had a fairly good air fleet. But he sort of just did what he could as soon as he took over TWA. And what part of it was a union play. It was hard to believe. I don't know, have you heard of Frank Lorenzo? So this guy, Frank Lorenzo, was vilified and made Carl look like a good knight, a white knight, because Frank Lorenzo had a reputation as an anti-union guy. And so the unions came to Carl and said, hey, we'll work with you. You're not our first choice, but you're our only choice. We'll work with you and try to have you take over the airline. And so the unions made some concessions to reduce operating costs. So he took over the airline. He sold the valuable routes. He did a sale leaseback of a large number of airplanes. So he really did take out a bunch of assets, or, sold a bunch of assets. Now, the one thing that TWA is known for, but I don't think this will ever show up on national television at the time.
Well, unless this podcast just goes insanely viral, right?
Well, it could. So I wrote the original structure memo on acquiring TWA. And in that memo, it wasn't like I just wrote it without help. Other people said that we're going to form a holding company which acquires 80% of TWA, more than 80%. Why? Because we could tax consolidate. So when they were heading toward their first bankruptcy, I think they had 3 bankruptcies, it was brought up that because the holding company owned 80% of TWA, and obviously Icahn owned the holding company, that there was an underfunded pension plan that technically could have been $1 billion. And Carl, and they put, if an 80% company bought TWA, which in this case happened, every company that Carl owned 80% or more of, even if they're completely unrelated to TWA, would be jointly liable for the underfunding of the pension plan. Nobody raised their hand and said they were the ERISA lawyer on that deal. It's one of the few times I really haven't seen something like this happen. I mean, maybe it did, but sure it's textbook in ERISA. So, he became liable. It was not a good moment. He became liable for the entire pension plan. And so in the bankruptcy, he negotiated the liability down, but he lost control of the company. He negotiated the liability down to, he lent them some money, and then he agreed to contribute to the PBGC, the pension corporation, $30 million for 8 years. So it came out of his pocket. TWA didn't have the resources to pay it.
So $240 million over 8
Yeah.
years he contributed to the pension plan.
Correct. The good news is we use it as an ordinary business deduction.
Go. There's always
So,
a silver lining when the tax guy's around.
Right. And he also lent them some money. And, he really wasn't, he lost his place as a controlling shareholder. He lost some money and he wanted to be repaid. And I think TWA was going into its second bankruptcy. And they set up something called the Caribou Ticket Agreement, which actually was pretty smart by Carl. Carl got the rights to buy tickets from TWA for a 45% discount. He was not allowed to buy any tickets that started or ended in St. Louis because that would have been embarrassing. And he was not allowed to buy tickets from, buy and sell tickets through agencies. He had to do it on his own. So what happened was the internet was starting to come up in those days. This was in the late 1990s. And he set up a company called lowestfare.com that sold them over the internet. And that wasn't covered. So he made a pretty good, that sort of brought back the loss he had in TWA by using that agreement.
And really the first online ticket seller of...
I think they were going to go public. As Carl would say, his wife, Gail, was the CEO of the company. And he said, Gail, and they were thinking of going public. He said, Gail, for one day you were a billionaire.
Well, we'll have to see if Gail comes on the podcast later.
She might. She could be very entertaining.
I'll bet. The plot points, the buying an airline with union support, corporate raiders, more than one of them, all of that gets used later by Oliver Stone to make the movie Wall Street, right?
Yeah. And I think Stone talked to Carl, if you want a friend, buy a dog type of stuff. And I don't think it was merely coincidental that I'm talking about the original Wall Street movie.
Right. The one that Michael Douglas.
Right. 1980.
Yeah.
It wasn't a mere coincidence that somehow the company they talked about was an airline company. So I would say there's more. It's not Carl. Carl never got into the kind of trouble that they did in that movie in terms of, with the government type of stuff. But if you had he's the closest. When Douglas gave that famous speech, some people could hear some Carlisms in it.
Yeah.
Greed is good, that type of stuff.
And then more recently, there was the Hertz case at the beginning of COVID. So Hertz is a rental car company, right?
Yep.
So what happened with Hertz?
Well, Hertz had a lot of debt, billions of dollars of debt, some of which financed their purchase of automobiles. They had a very large auto fleet. The pandemic started in March of 2020, and at first blush, Hertz just went down, down, and down. People weren't renting cars. So they filed bankruptcy. They weren't getting much revenues. They had tremendous debt, especially on their rail car fleet.
Rental car fleet.
Rental car. Oh, rail car. They're all.
You got rail car
Yeah.
in the brain.
It's like Glenn Campbell. All right. So they had all these, rental cars. And they went into bankruptcy. And Carl, a group of us got together. It was a Memorial Day weekend. Carl said, somehow they talked Carl into selling all his shares on the first day of bankruptcy. And the reason he wanted to sell them, you get like 50 cents. Most bankruptcies, the equity's wiped out. So, and if he didn't sell them on the first day, most of the bankruptcy courts will put restrictions on sales in order to preserve things like the NOLs of Hertz. But we determined that we wouldn't hurt Hertz. We own 30% of the company. We sold 30% of Hertz on the market in the first day of the bankruptcy. And in one of the most unusual situations, a few months later, in like May, June, whatever, of 2020, the value of used cars went way up. And in effect went above the debt. And it was one of the few situations where shareholders actually had value in a bankruptcy. I mean, it was a completely unforeseen thing. I mean, you got the pandemic. You're not thinking that, nobody was thinking that this would turn around.
Right.
But that's what happened. So he sold all his shares on the first day. And in that situation, maybe he shouldn't have, but, nobody could have predicted that, I don't think.
So then you retired about 2 years ago, is that right?
Yes.
And is Carl still active?
Yeah, the company's not as active as it used to be. He's 89. And the company doesn't have the amount of operating companies it used to have, but it's still operating. There's a hedge fund piece to it, which goes out and buys investments, and there's still an operating piece, but it's not, let's say, at the same level that it has been in the past.
But if you go on his website, he's still writing letters.
Well, we haven't done an activist campaign. When I say we, the royal we.
Yeah.
He really hasn't. In the last couple of years, he's done a couple.
Yeah.
And he's written some letters. You can go to carlicahn.com and see some letters.
Okay. Did I miss anything of what we agreed to cover? I think
I didn't even look at the sheets, so.
Yeah, for anybody listening, I provide an outline in advance. I don't expect him to have memorized every one of these, although since you didn't have to look, you obviously know this stuff.
I'm just looking to see if there's anything big. I think he caught it all. It's not jumping up at me.
In just 2 hours. That was something we had no idea how long this was going to take, but
It's hard to believe.
do it in 2 hours. That's not bad.
Yeah, I think we covered it all.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to thank you for the time that you've given to the university. You've appeared here a few times. Most recently, we had you talk to the Business Law Society, and I think one of the better attended. It's got to be the all-time top attendance for a tax presentation at the University of Cincinnati College of Law, and the students were just, very, very excited about having you there, listening to what you had to say. And I just personally appreciate how much time you've given to us at the university.
Thank you. More than happy.
All right. Well, we'll have you back up here soon.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Jordan.
Bye.